Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Onedrus Wellness, and Donovan Jensen is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and here's my amazing co-host, Donovan. And today I have an incredible guest, Karishma Bali, who's coming from Chicago. She is a 5-time marathoner, turned into a CEO, and is genuinely hyped up to be alive. So please welcome Karishma. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Awesome. Great. Yeah. So why don't you start by telling us a little about your story and journey from becoming a marathoner to a CEO?
Yeah. Oh gosh, let's see if I can condense this. A lot of different kind of factors contributed to both. But I'd say my, marathon running journey started about 5 years ago. So very specifically January of 2016. I was kind of at a point where I felt kind of lost professionally and a little bit personally too. It was nearing toward the end of college, and basically things that I was doing in terms of just like the work I was putting into things weren't necessarily reaping its benefits. So I was kind of just tired of working towards goals that only had some sort of merit attached to it. So, so I started off that new year and I was like, I'm going to set a goal that literally has absolutely nothing to do with anything that would contribute to my professional life and wouldn't necessarily mean anything to anyone else aside from me. And that was to run actually a half marathon. And a little bit of the backstory, it wasn't necessarily going from, couch to half marathon. I did grow up as an athlete, did kind of incorporate exercise and just fitness into my life, but I hated running. So that's why this challenge was a bit different than you would think, I guess, like starting out. So I went on and completed that half marathon. It was April of 2016, completed it with a friend, which was really fun. But then after, I kind of had this void that felt like it needed to be filled. So, before then, the past 12 weeks were very much so ingrained on the strict training plan. I was on a strict kind of like diet to go along with it, strength training, all of the fitness and kind of wellness components that go along with it. And I kind of got like a high from it. So essentially, pulled the plug and was like, let's just sign up for the Chicago Bank of America full marathon. Did that in October of 2016, and the rest has kind of been history. So I've been actually training and running one full race, and actually in very different places, one every single year since. So that's kind of the marathon story.
Cool. Yeah, my sister is actually a long distance runner. She's done like ultras and the one that's like overnight. She got hooked. Actually, we started running. I wouldn't describe myself as a runner too. We actually did a triathlon in 2010, I believe, and a sprint triathlon. And then after that, I stopped running. Well, actually, eventually I did a half marathon myself, but she just continued to build her running and got hooked. And it clearly is like a mindset thing for a lot of people in that, you have to push through a lot to keep going and going. And so I'd be curious, what was like the shift from becoming like, I hate running or I'm not a runner to now I'm a marathoner. What was like the switch, if there was one, or is there a moment?
Yeah. And I think it's kind of almost, for me, it became like that addiction to constantly pushing through, because I had kind of like a challenging like time growing up. I always kind of struggled to kind of achieve things. And once I achieve things, I kind of look back and I'm like, okay, I do find value in the growth that occurred to get there. And for running, it became this kind of like addiction because it translated over to a lot of other aspects of my life. Both professional, personal, like breaking through barriers, really pushing through and being strategic about my goals and how I could orient them and getting to those things. But for running, I definitely say it was towards towards training. I think training for the almost like the ending of like that first half race, and then just realizing that I could actually push my body to do these things. And if I could push my body physically, then I could definitely push myself mentally. And so I guess the two definitely go hand in hand. And I guess there is like that whole, just like the biological component, right? Like there's so many studies that say, you know, pushing through with any sort of kind of fitness activity or just incorporating fitness into your life, you essentially release like happy hormones and you become happier, your mood's better. And of course, you know, we want to keep feeding into that. So that kind of contributed to me as well. So now I'm actually trying to figure out where to do my sixth. I did a virtual race last year, which was nice that I was able to have an experience like that. But let me tell you, there's like a whole another experience from, you know, doing 26.2 miles by yourself versus having like that whole crowd component cheering you on.
For sure.
Yeah, I guess like that's kind of a long winding answer to where that shift kind of happened or the different factors that contributed to it.
So you mentioned some of the pieces of your running history, right? And how that started tying into your life. But it sounds like you've taken it even further than that and are currently working on some stuff. So I'd be curious to learn a little bit more about kind of the project you're working on and how the running pieces overlap or interweave with that.
Yeah. So most recently, I guess like I can give you kind of like a bit about my like professional background or educational background. I went to undergrad, studied Anthropology, went on to 2 different grad programs. So did a master's in Global Entrepreneurial Management based in 3 different cities, and then a master's in Medical Physiology / Biology. So always just had like this, I guess like desire to create and execute and lead and intertwining the 2 disciplines. So last year I actually founded Pulse Athletic Apparel. And this is an athletic / athleisure apparel brand. And that definitely stems from a lot of those like professional interests, but then kind of tying it into running. You know, there's so many pieces that go into that as well. And I think that just being in the fitness world, being a marathon runner, you as, you know, by default spend an absurd amount of money on athletic apparel, on accessories, on just things that you need to be able to run. And it got me thinking about just the type of community that I valued, the type of brands that I liked or didn't like, or just like things like representation and affordability, and going even a step further into things like healthcare disparities and disparities to things like, you know, fitness resources or just apparel in and of itself, and how that influenced the decision of some to even start a fitness journey of their own. So kind of by just taking all of these components, I wanted to put forth a movement that was kind of based on a lot of these different elements. So creating a brand that was a bit more, you know, it was very inclusive. That was like probably one of the founding reasons as to why it was created. And the inclusivity comes in all different aspects for me. It comes from size inclusivity, not kind of comparing yourself starting out to someone who may be very fit and very toned. I think that kind of gets lost in translation for a bit, especially in like the fitness world, because that's what you see. You don't really see what real people look like starting out. So wanting to create a brand that really kind of showcased that or encouraged starting a fitness journey at any component or any whatever stage you are at life. Starting a brand that was very community centered. So it was a pandemic company, or it is a pandemic company. It was officially launched last year. And I think that it was just a very lonely year in all aspects. I'm glad that things are kind of coming back to a norm, whatever that might be for this year and just moving forward. But it was very easy to, I guess, feel isolated. So health and, you know, just wellness and those senses were already being compromised. So I wanted to create a community that kind of took a jab at being like, hey, it's okay, but if you want to start a fitness journey of your own, come check us out. We offer like, you know, fitness resources and just kind of very people-centered platform in that sense. And then just also going back into the movement, I guess. So one of the biggest movements that we started is hashtag Pulse Forward. The brand is called Pulse Athletic Apparel. And Pulse Forward means a lot of different things. So for me in my personal life, it means, okay, let's take things literally each step, each run, each mile, and you're able to overcome things, not just for the run, but whatever you may be going through mentally, whatever you may be going through personally as well. And translating that out to people and saying, regardless of what stage you're at, regardless of like the feelings you may be feeling, especially how heightened they may be in this pandemic, you have that inner grit and that inner ability to kind of pulse through as well.
I love it. Yeah. So I'm curious, I think when people are doing a marathon or starting a business or these things that do require a lot of grit to like push through, there's a lot of like noise in your head about like, I can't do it. It's too hard. I'm going to fail. Like all of that mental noise. Like, what would you say to people on how to address that?
Oh gosh, I guess like a few different things. And that definitely exists for me. I feel like even still, like I'm not perfect or haven't nailed down the formula by any means. It's been like a constant work and constant kind of growth in progress, I'd like to say. But for me, it's really just been kind of keeping a physical, like written notebook of just kind of examining like what challenges and obstacles I've overcome in the past and recognizing where I am at this very point and just like seeing how all that growth happened because I kind of believed in myself and continue to really pulsing forward. So I think just my advice could be it's different for everyone. Everyone's in very different situations. It could be your own noise. It could be, and I've even experienced like external noise, right? Like for people that may be close to you or once were close to you. And a lot of things kind of shift when you're starting something new, when you're trying to really do something that isn't quite the norm or is a bit more uncomfortable. So it's really just trying to rely as much on yourself as possible because that's what's going to help you pulse through. And for my kind of toolkit, I guess that I have for that has definitely been, this notebook, really just kind of sorting things out in terms of like writing them through and really just recognizing patterns of things that didn't work in the past and understanding patterns of things that did work in the past and really focusing on those. But I think, kind of going through that as well. One of the other aspects that I like doing is really just kind of moving. So for me, blocking out the noise, it's very easy to do when you're, physically running and in terms of movement like that, or just kind of being very action oriented. So trying to figure out the steps that you need to take to get to whatever your end goal is. What if it's starting a business, taking things literally one milestone at a time, figuring out a name, figuring out a niche, figuring out more logistical steps and just taking them at one milestone at a time too. So then you're still continuing to move and you're still trying to pursue whatever it is or, chase whatever goal it is that you're trying to pursue. And then I guess just the other two, this might have been implied, but running and fitness has also just helped me. And then actually incorporating meditation into my regimen as well. I try to meditate twice a day, very short increments, but once in the morning for about 5 minutes and once at night for about 3 minutes too. And that still helps me in that sense.
So I have maybe a different question than you may have been expecting, but it just came to me, which is, I have heard some people say that when they are running or running in a certain way, they feel something that is similar to a meditative state. I will tell you right now, that has never once happened for me. So I would be curious how you draw the parallels between those two things or how you see them connected or like the differences. If you've ever even experienced that. I don't want to say that you have. I have no idea.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought that up because I actually started both like meditation and like the traditional aspect and running around the same time. But I think running for me has been way more meditative than the traditional aspect in certain senses. And what I mean by that is, and this might sound absolutely crazy. But once like you get past the first few minutes, your body starts kind of creating this sort of alignment or this like rhythm with each step that you're taking, and like literally just strokes of hitting the ground. And you start to feel very connected with where you're at and where you're moving towards, if that makes sense. And this is, you know, irrespective of any location. I could literally be in like a suburb of Chicago running on concrete. I could be along the Lakefront Trail in Chicago. I've traveled quite a bit. So I could be, you know, one of the coolest races that I did was in Spain and running along like the coast there. But I think what all of those different experiences had was that connectedness that you're able to reach by just kind of focusing on each progressive step. And therefore that kind of becomes very meditative, at least for me. And I apologize if that sounded a bit crazy.
No, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. Like I said, having not really experienced that, like I'm more like a puppy, like to run, I need somebody to throw a ball, like I need something to chase. If I just run on my own, it's not going to last very long. But for someone who hasn't really experienced that state, I was just curious what your take was on some of the similarities and differences. And it sounds like for the people that it works for, it is a good way to get very present with your physical space.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that even just kind of going back to like part of the conversation we had earlier on what kind of triggers it or what kind of maintains, like, why do you keep doing it? It's definitely that piece to it, because you feel like you just feel so connected. And I think like as humans, we like having that sense. It's definitely like a need for us, like on a psychological level. And if you're able to do that and feel connected by doing something by yourself, then you can only imagine how you can translate that elsewhere as well.
Have you been able to do a marathon? This might be just kind of a random question that popped into my head.
Sure.
It's like, have you been able to do like a whole marathon in that meditative state where you're actually enjoying it, or is it just normal and natural to just like hate part of it and just push through? Because for me, like when I did my half marathon, I didn't train enough to like, I trained up to like 10 miles and I was like, oh, 3 more miles won't be so bad. I ran out of time to train up a little bit more. And it was like those last 3 miles that like killed me. I walk at least half of that. And yeah, I feel like for me, I guess when I was training and running, like the sweet spot was like 3 miles of like, okay, it feels good. But then I think beyond that, it just kind of sucks. And I don't know if for other runners, if it can actually feel good for like a full 26 miles or not. So what are your thoughts on that?
Oh gosh. I have spoken to people who do feel that way, the full 26.2 miles in that meditative state. I have not gotten there yet. I'll be very honest with you. And I think it goes in waves, right? Like for me, just like I think mentally I've been at very different stages of life during each race. But I think the beginning always starts out the same. You're very excited, especially, you know, I was even excited during the virtual actually when I did it by myself. But when there's crowds, right, you're looking around, all these people are smiling, they're so happy. It's probably like 4:35 in the morning, but like all these people are just like ready to go for it with the same goal in mind. But then, you know, you start off fast, and that's something that I've kind of gotten better at. So you're starting off fast. Then about like midway through, you're like, crap, I'm getting tired. I shouldn't have started out that fast. You start slowing down. And then for me, it's always at the mile 20, because it's like the same thing. They say like, don't train for, so I have never, during training mode, I've never trained for more than 22 miles. So the last 4 are supposed to be on adrenaline, right? And sometimes that adrenaline, you're just like kicking yourself in the head. And you're like, oh my gosh, why did I think this was only going to be 4 miles? 4 miles is still 4 miles. And you know, you're sweating out of places you didn't think that was possible. You're like starting to chafe, you know, you feel blisters coming on. And that definitely, that physical pain in that sense it's very easy to distract away from the meditative euphoric state. So I haven't gotten there. I have met people who have gotten there. Maybe their pain tolerance is just much higher than mine is. Who knows?
Maybe they have to like run 100 miles to have 26 miles feel like a piece of cake.
Oh yeah, maybe. Like those ultra runners. And you just said your sister who's like training for like the night marathon. That's amazing.
Yeah. I have no idea how she does that. She does. Yeah.
Going back to sort of this interaction between some of the challenges you faced physically and sort of the way that you mentioned you had a journal. So I'll be curious a little bit more like some of the details, not like what you actually put in the journal, but sort of the way that you structure that process. So is it like you write down whenever you achieve something and then you review that when you're maybe not feeling 100% confident about something, or like what goes in the journal and how do you use it?
Yeah. So before, I'll be very honest, very unstructured. I just kind of used it as if, something was bothering me. It was just like a really, really crappy day. I was in a really crappy mindset. I just like needed some place where I could throw everything out. And then just let it sit and then at least just get it out of my system and, leave it there. But then progressively it just kind of turned into, okay, if I'm like writing about all the things that just suck and like when I'm in this like crappy mental state, let's kind of shift it and do more about things that are going well and like talking about highlights. And I think this is very interesting. I've talked to a few friends about this and it's so easy. And I'm actually curious to hear both of your takes on this as well. It's so easy to kind of go down that rabbit hole and just really like overemphasize things that are negative. And when something positive happens, we like talk about it for maybe 2 seconds and then it'll affect our mood for maybe 2 seconds and then it'll go away. So just like having that or being cognizant of that, I wanted to try to like shift my own like mental state. So then that's why I kind of became both. And then it became from, just randomly talking or randomly like writing like in this journal, whether there was a highlight that happened or whether it was just a really like, crappy day or crappy set of days to like a weekly thing. And that's where I'm at about now. So towards like the end of the week, kind of dissecting it like high highs, low lows, anything notable that may have happened. And then not just like talking about it in like a professional setting, but also just like a personal setting as well. So like thinking about, like building on friendships, like something great that happened in that sense, a disagreement that I've had with like a friend, because realistically that happens too. And I think just being more in tune with those 2 aspects have really like strengthened that aspect of my life as well. So so I guess I just went from very unstructured word vomit to still word vomit, but categorical word vomit with more intention now.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because there are many number of ways to use journaling. And I think a lot of people think of it traditionally as kind of what you were saying, what you began with, which is just kind of, I'll just put whatever in here and I won't really use it for anything. And there are many ways to structure things that provide benefits in certain realms. Also, just journaling whatever is also helpful because it forces you to put your thoughts and emotions into a form that's actually coherent. That because a lot of times it's just feelings and half thoughts and whatever else and things that go throughout the day, or like a couple rumblings that kind of pop off or whatever. But once you actually write it out, you have a more tangible form of it. So there's that one really useful piece. And then, like you were saying, you can also use it, and this is mostly what I use journaling for, to structure out kind of your highs and lows throughout the week, and then use that to pinpoint certain things and say, okay, so this was really bad. And you didn't mention this part. I don't know if you do this, but what I do is like, oh, this was particularly bad part of my week. What do I have in my control to adjust for this thing? And, potentially it's like, I'm in a car crash. It sucks. I can't do anything. Like just move on, live with it. But it's really useful to have all that data and have everything structured out. And I think that's like one of the most valuable tools that people can use. And you mentioned a question. I don't think I actually asked it. You said you wanted to hear our opinion on something. And then I started rambling and I forgot what it was.
No, that's all right. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's actually very similar to what I do in terms of just like kind of using it to kind of like analyze and move forward. But I've gotten very careful over the last few months to not overanalyze, because I realized how easy it is to literally, what's like that phrase, like paralysis by overanalysis. Realize how easy it's easy to go down that rabbit hole, and then those can have detrimental effects too. But the thing that I was curious to hear both of your takes on is kind of like this idea that it's easier to kind of like feel negative emotions or kind of talk about things that are bothering us than celebrating. And I feel like it's in terms of time, right? I think like we'll kind of dwell on things that are negative for longer periods of time than actually sit in celebration or sit in happiness. I don't know where this comes from. I don't know if it's cultural. I don't know if it's mental. I don't know if it's thinking about judgment or, what it's affiliated with, but I've noticed myself doing this too. And I don't know if it's because we spend longer times in hardship and adversity than in celebration, or no idea what the correlation is, but that's something that I've been trying to be more cognizant of. So curious to hear your thoughts.
I have a take, but you can talk first, Dr. Alice, if you want.
Well, yeah, I would say I think a lot of us fall into this trap of, dwelling on the negative things that happen in our life. They seem so like daunting or bad. And yeah, I think when it comes to like celebration of the joys, it's like, oh, well, yay, party for 2 seconds, but I have to get back to my life. It's like I don't think we give ourselves permission to have that celebration as much, because there's just so much to do in life. So I don't know if that's part of it. What is your thoughts, Donovan?
Yeah, so this is not proven, but there is an idea out there that we dwell on and remember the negative things that happen to us more because we need to be able to use that information in the future to avoid those things. Whereas the positive things, we don't, and it's not as natural to remember them or dwell on them because it's like type 1, type 2 error, right? If something is actually dangerous and you forget about it, and then that bad thing happens again and it causes you harm, that's non-recoverable. Like you can't anyway. So the idea there is basically like we are hardwired to some degree to dwell on negative things so that we don't end up missing something dangerous. The other piece that I was going to touch on, and again, that's not proven. That's just like an idea that's floating out there that to me sounds pretty good. And I'm like, well, maybe. The other piece is there's some research out that basically says having a gratitude journal or practice or whatever else is one of the best things you can do to improve your happiness. So it's very, very common for people to dwell on the negatives, and it takes active effort to like train your brain to try to come up with the things to be grateful for. So that's my take. I don't know how real that thing is. Somebody could go and disprove that theory at any minute, but that is one idea floating around that I heard that seems plausible.
Yes, I guess that makes sense, right? So there's like an evolutionary concept that's kind of attached to it. And then with like the gratitude journal, that makes sense. I've tried implementing that or trying to attach that. It's very difficult. I don't know if it's just my consistency and discipline isn't like hard enough, isn't as great enough to do that. But I'm curious too, like, I guess like do both of you kind of keep gratitude journals, or is that kind of an element that you have?
I'm also terrible at being consistent with that.
Okay.
I don't know, Donovan.
So I have had one in the past, and I did not find super great results with it. I think maybe the more accurate or useful thing to say is some sort of gratitude practice, because when I shifted to that and just made sure I spend a few minutes every day going through at least 3 things I'm grateful for, just in my mind and like remembering them and not writing them out. For me, that has been super effective. Like that has been much more useful, way more consistent. And I think that's in line with what the research is just like developing some sort of gratitude, something or other. But yeah, no, the actual journal, I tried it for like 2 years and I was very consistent and I hated it every second, which is ironic because it was a gratitude journal, but no, not a fit for me. Very strong proponent of trying different types of tools to find what flavor actually fits you.
Yeah. And I will say, like, when I was doing it, I don't keep a journal, but I guess when I'm in a down or for something bad happens, it just be like, okay, what can I be grateful in this moment? Because my mind wants to pull me into being sorry for myself. So I have to remember, oh, I still have a roof over my head. I still have all my 5 senses. I still, I have friends and family. There's always things to be grateful for. So that kind of makes the sucky moments less sucky.
Yeah.
Positive. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I agree. I think I'm like a similar way. Because if it's like something that you have to physically write down, I don't know, it seems like a chore, and that's not what it's supposed to be. But if you can, like, I guess that's the whole point of it, right? To like mentally kind of condition yourself to have it by like second nature.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I think some people really get the feeling from writing it down. It sounds like none of us are those people. But I think that's the problem, is like actually writing it down felt very mechanical and logical to me. And I didn't feel like I couldn't produce the feeling of gratitude while writing it out.
Yeah, this is like, I guess like one of the last things on that's exactly how I felt, because especially I remember, I think it was April of last year. Yeah. So very, very new, literally at the onset of this pandemic. I was just like writing the same things down every day. And I'm like, okay, but this is a given. It's like hard to, there's literally no emotion attached to it whatsoever. So yeah.
For sure. Great. Well, Karishma, it's been so great having you on our show. Was there anything you'd like to plug before we wrap up today?
Oh yeah, thank you so much for having me. Really enjoy this conversation. Definitely check out my athletic apparel brand. It's called Pulse Athletic Apparel. We are on, I think, virtually every social media platform as Pulse Athletic Apparel. So, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, what's the last one? TikTok. So I think we cover those all. And then our website is just, www.pulseathleticapparel.com.
Great. Excellent. And we'll link that in the description below. So check that out, everyone. Just got some amazing parallel for all body types. So check it out. And Karishma, thank you so much for being on our show today.
Thanks so much. Really enjoyed meeting you guys and virtually connecting.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and then go and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you get notified when the next video comes out. If you check out in the description below, go to my website where you can get my free fast and easy guide to stress relief. Thanks again for checking us out, and we'll see you next time.